Cats, it's Jake, and this is MTD&D's Harbinger Bastion, Bastards of Bastion, a brand new sci-fi, dark science fantasy D&D campaign starting tonight with episode 1 early release, in which we are going to be exploring the dark reaches of the known orbits and beyond in the world of Harbinger from Absolute Tabletop. This is a playtest, so many things are kind of being tried out. I've run a few Harbinger playtest games here on the channel myself, and Chad has actually played in one of those. Megan has played in a few. I've played in some Megan Harbinger games. It's a fantastic thing. You can learn more about it by going to harbingerrpg.com or checking out at Absolute Tabletop. And just check out Absolute Tabletop anyway. They got all kinds of awesome stuff going on. And a few of us are pretty active in that group. I'm very excited to have these 4 players with me for depending on their survival rate, for about the next 8 weeks, as we have 2 states and 3 countries represented here with us tonight. I'm just excited about this. And these games are going to be approximately 2 to 2.5 hours each Sunday night at 8 Eastern, right here on twitch.tv/mini-terrain-domain. So, without further ado, I'm going to take a moment to introduce the 4 players, let them tell us a little bit about themselves, and why don't you go ahead when you're done talking about you in real life, tell us just a few lines about who your character is. And I'm going to throw it to Chad to go first.
Hi, I'm Chad. I'm the other Chad in the Absolute Tabletop group. Otherwise, we would be Chad Nick. You can follow some of the games I've been in on YouTube under my name, Chad Smith, if you'd like. Excited to play again with Jake. This is going to be a blast. I'm liking Harbinger. Looking forward to what's coming out in the future for it, hopefully in the near future. And I'm excited to get this underway. I'm playing Orion. He's the Mancer, and he's a little bit unstable with his capabilities as a Mancer. So we're gonna see how that pans out. Thank you.
Next, let's hear from Megan.
Hey everyone, I'm Megan. I am one half of the YouTube channel Dice on Ice, where we run a lot of different games, Harbinger included. I am super excited to be playing this. Harbinger is one of my favorite settings, and tonight, and for this campaign, I will be playing Cursed Soriano, who is a Mancer, convicted of basically being a space pirate. So I will, I'm very excited to play with Jake again and with all these wonderful players. Thanks for having me.
Next, let's hear from Dwight.
Hey everybody, my name is Dwight. This is actually my first time playing Harbinger. Been playing D&D for several years now, and but I'm a huge fan of sci-fi and just dark things in general, so I'm excited to play, get into Harbinger here. I've known Jake for several years. He tends to kill me, so I don't really like my chances. But I tried really hard to kill him in our home game last night, but didn't work. So
took me down to two failed death saving throws.
So I'm looking forward to this. I am playing Fenris Demidar. He is a soldier who has been imprisoned for some pretty heinous acts, which he may or may not actually have been guilty of. So we'll just leave it at that. So he's a longtime soldier, not necessarily the smartest or the sharpest tool in the shed, the smartest person in his unit, but really good soldier. So we'll see how this goes.
And finally, let's hear from Alexa.
Hey everyone, I am Alexa. It's very exciting for me to be here. I hadn't heard of Harbinger before seeing Jake's tweet, but I am a fan of D&D and I'm a fan of sci-fi, and I was thinking, well, this is a great combination, so let's hop in. I'll be playing a trader, Quinn Gilliani, who is or was in a previous life a soldier, convicted for her apparent role in the death of a politician. We'll find out exactly what happened there and who was guilty of what, if anyone. But in the meantime, it's just I'm very excited and a little nervous. So we'll see how it goes. Oh yeah, and you can find me playing on Twitch at Blue Alexa and on Twitter as well. So I'll see you there.
And a quick side note, apparently I was so excited to get things going, I screwed up a couple things on the overlay that I will fix for the next session next week. I think I got a couple of the classes wrong. Apparently Chad is something called a mansert. There's an extra T in there. And Alexa's playing a treader, not a mancer. All of that will be fixed, so pay no attention to that. And if you're looking for Alexa on Twitch and Twitter, there's no E in blue. I just by habit, 40 plus years of writing the word blue, put an E in there, I guess. So as you've kind of picked up on from their character descriptions, the bastards of Bastion are prisoners that are being watched over by the Consortium Reserve, which is an organization that's a consortium of mining companies and merchants that kind of cooperatively hold control over the rings of Bastion for all mining concerns, since there's so many precious metals, minerals, gems, gold, silver, copper, all that stuff. No one particular group has any legal claim to the rings. And the Consortium Reserve is the consortium's military force and also runs the prison and quote-unquote rehabilitation programs. So one thing I would like to have my players do immediately before we get going is roll me a d12. And you can go ahead and just say whatever it is that you get.
11.
Got a 12.
10.
4.
So it looks like Isaiah is the newest of the prisoners who's been on this work detail and with this group for the last 4 months. Kierce has been here for a full year. This is the first year of your sentence. You were actually sentenced on the day that the Harbinger arrived. Fenris, you showed up a month after Kierce did, so you've been here for 11 months. And Quinn, you've been here for 10 months. And you've all of you have been serving out your sentence in excursions that are usually weeks long, where Consortium Reserve transportation vessel will take you up from one of the various bases of operations and take you to various asteroids in the belt, in the rings of different sizes, more often than not mining precious metals. All of you have sophisticated, by Bastion standards, sophisticated neck braces, that these collars that act as inhibitors. You know that the guards can activate these to send a minor jolt to get your attention. They can briefly paralyze you, and that these collars suppress any Astra manipulation. They basically act as a barrier, kind of like lead to radiation. They act as a barrier preventing direct contact with Astra. The overall, and this is primarily for world building and for the audience, the world of Harbinger, and in this setting, as we're playing it, is very, all technology is built on the remains of the Old Dominion. No new interstellar travel has been discovered. That was lost centuries ago under the Old Dominion. No real new tech has been developed. Everything is very what I like to call cobble tech. Think of it as very much like Mad Max in space. Everything is lived in, very worn and gritty. The only new tech that has been showing up is some very peculiar technologies that occasionally teams that foray into the Harbinger itself have discovered. Harbinger, we're gonna learn more about Harbinger and the world. So, by way of introduction, right now you all have finished a long 12-hour shift of duty mining Oracolum, which is an incredibly valuable resource. So you are watched ever closely as this resource is being mined. Bastion, a lone gas giant planet with a prominent ring system composed of ice and rock, plentiful with minerals and gems, and the sought-after Oracolum, an astroconductive metal. Oracolum is a valuable resource used to construct weapons, armor, and even starships. The Rings of Bastion are owned by no one sept. They are instead loosely governed by the Consortium, a collective of mining clans and merchant guilds. The ice and rock moonlets of the rings are host to tens of thousands of laborers and merchants, including thousands of barrel-mech workers, and of course, the bastards. Dozens of moons orbit Bastion, and many of them are colonized. But there are still a few moons with long paths that take them far beyond the known orbits. Not a few of these moons have yet to be discovered. The most tragic of the moons of Bastion is Verloren. Verloren was once a lush moon teeming with life, covered in world-spanning temperate rainforests. It was, perhaps, the one moon of Bastion that radiated hope. But now, it is a shattered moon, broken and drifting through the void. Its surface now infested with hordes of undead gaunts, all because of the Harbinger. Alien spacecraft, artificial moon, living creature, celestial tomb. The Harbinger is everything and nothing simultaneously. The salvation of humanity and its impending doom. The Harbinger represents lost wisdom, arcane secrets, and world-changing technology just as readily as it represents death, calamity, and forbidden knowledge. The Harbinger is a Leviathan structure, larger even than some of Bastion's populated moons. Its true size and shape cannot be accurately measured, for it seems to reshape itself at random. It has no discernible silhouette of form, and can rarely be perceived in its fullness, for it seems to consume light rather than reflect it. Within, the Harbinger is riddled with maze-like corridors and chambers beyond counting. From its innards came all manner of eldritch horror. It's been a year since the Harbinger first arrived, shattering Verloren and our preconceived notions of what our lives mean in the known orbits. But still, the moons revolve around Bastion and the rings persist. The septs rule and war among themselves. Traders, spacers, explorers, and scrappers continue their forays, sanctioned and unsanctioned alike, into the Harbinger, blasting off day and night from terminus dusk. And criminals continue to break the laws, and the Consortium Reserve continues to babysit these bastards. Suddenly, the guard Leavenworth yells at Riker to knock it off. Hey! Why don't you quit with that damn voiceover? I've told you a million times, the Whisperneck Broadcast Network is not going to pick you up. You're a prison guard. Every damn time you do this, staring out the window, narrating our trip back and forth, I'm getting sick of it, Riker. You never know, Leavenworth. If I keep practicing at it, I just might find a way out of this place. He turns and looks at the prisoner closest to him. Fenris leans in. What do you think there, Demidar? You think I got a chance at the Whisper Network broadcasts?
No.
What do you know? The four of you are in your behind a cage separated from the guards. There are 4 guards and a pilot, as always, on the Consortium Reserve transport. There are 4 other prisoners in here with you. There is a Romualdo Bax, who is also known as the Smiler. He's a always thin person with wispy long hair. You know that he's doing time for because he's a serial killer that was known for cutting wide smiles into all of his victims from ear to ear. Dorian Hennessy is a heist girl. That was her thing, was just taking down whatever corporation, merchant guild, or bank that she could. Trinity, the White Rabbit Hewlett, is a hacker. And Florence Disco, just called Crazy, is a brute of a woman, dark-skinned, large, bare-knuckle brawler. Rumor has it that she was an enforcer for a black market criminal organization. Your 4 guards, as always, assigned specifically to you 8 criminals, are Riker, Folsom, Joliet, and Leavenworth. And the pilot is Sing Sing. The Leavenworth and Riker continue to joke amongst themselves. Folsom and Joliet sit stoically and quiet. You know that you're in for, after this 12-hour shift, you are in for at least a 45-minute haul back to the bunkhouse, where you'll be lucky to get about 6 hours of sleep before you have to pull another 12-hour shift. You each are... There's 4 prisoners on a side. You have 5-point harnesses holding you in position. The guards also have jump seats, but they seem to kind of move freely about the cabins. Quinn and Kierce, you are sitting across from each other. Fenris and Isaiah, you are sitting across from each other. And then Romualdo and Dorian are across from each other, and Trinity and Florence are across from each other. So at this point, you've got some time as you're traveling. If you guys typically would banter among yourselves or whatever, I'll give you a few moments to say what you will.
First would be just kind of looking around with this almost bored expression on her face, and she would be kind of really fidgety around, and every time she does so, it just moves the strap and it just creates like this whine on this like older ship. So she'll just like move, squeak, move, just kind of very unsettled.
Joliet bangs against the bars, the cage. Soriano, quit fidgeting. You're gonna pull this dang ship apart.
Don't we have any music to listen to this time?
No, and if I catch you singing again, I'm going to sew your lips shut.
She just smiles. She just smiles at her. That would be something different. What do you think, Quinn? Do you think I could pull that off? The whole mouth sewn shut look?
I think Quinn would, as always, just be the good soldier. Always hoping that her situation would one day be cleared, one day soon be cleared, and constantly waiting for that day. She's just, it's like, I don't belong here. These are criminals. I'm not a criminal. So she would kind of just look straight ahead, not causing any trouble, but as you address her, she would look at Kirst and kind of glance at the guards to see how they react, and she would just, I don't know, I guess that would be her non-committal response. And then glance back at the guards again to see just kind of how the how this exchange is received.
Overall, the guards generally, especially for you that have been here a little bit longer, they generally don't get too down on you about minor chatter, unless they're in a pissy mood, which they don't seem to be right now.
And then she adds, I wouldn't mind music though.
Right? Thank you, Quinn. And she would like look over to Juliet just like with this, see, I'm totally right. Look.
What about Fenris? How's Fenris Demidar doing on this trip back?
Fenris is just sitting there kind of stoic. He's a very large, very, very large man that doesn't really fit well in this harness. He looks like he should be uncomfortable, but he's just kind of got a blank stare on his face, staring at the wall in front of him. As is usually the case with him, he doesn't move much or say much unless given a reason to. Doesn't really react at all to the conversations around him. It's just kind of there.
Trinity just starts humming lightly. Florence Disco, the one they call Crazy, just holds on to her restraints and just stares angrily, staring straight at Trinity. What about Isaiah?
He would try to be leaning as far as he could, kind of mirrored on your screen here. He'd be leaning as far as he could to try to not have anyone touch his right arm at all. And he'd be like, this is my side. And then after some time later, someone would touch him again and he'd try to move away. Stay on your side. And over time, he's just, on this trip, he's definitely very anxious to be on this craft, even though it's something that they've probably done numerous times. It's not something that's very settled with him. He'd just be trying to keep to himself and try to make sure that no one was really touching him.
And I think it's probably Trinity that's on that side of you that seems to almost deliberately just be rubbing against, almost like she's kind of flirting with you. But in a way, it's more that she's just trying to get your goat. She likes riling you up. After just a little bit, Joliet up at the front behind the cage, he kind of reaches back and knocks on the door, the bulkhead door that leads up to the pilot section. And then he pushes a button on the intercom there, and he says, "Hey, Sing Sing, why don't you take us on a flyby?" Folsom turns to Joliet. "You ask him to do that every other time we're up here. You know we're not sanctioned to go anywhere near within 20 kilometers of the Harbinger. It's out of the way. You know it's going to take us at least an extra half hour." Relax. These guys don't know. We're getting a break when we get back. We got 3 days before we got to come back out to the rings. Let's just do a flyby. Come on, Sing Sing, take us by. And drop the viewports. There's a moment's silence, and then you just kind of hear over the intercom, "All right, boss." There's behind each of you, you hear, and you see across as the metal panels behind your heads, in these kind of triangular sections, drop down, revealing thick plasteel viewports where you can see now. You're looking out across the Rings of Bastion. You can see the gas giant that is Bastion. You can see a couple of the moons. And if you kind of lean a little bit, you can see that you're approaching at an oblique angle to the Harbinger itself. At first, Harbinger appears almost as a void. There's almost no reflected surfaces on it. It seems to just absorb the light reflected from the gas giant, from the sun the sunlight in this region. Barely anything penetrates into the depths of the surface of the Harbinger. And it's massive. You hear Sing Sing say, "Gonna take it into 15 clicks?" Joliet says, "Let's go to 10. "You got it, boss." As you start getting closer, Harbinger starts to fill any view that you can see. And as you're flying, you start flying alongside it. Kirst and Isaiah, you can see over the shoulders of Quinn and Fenris as you're looking at the Harbinger. And after a few moments, Sing Sing rolls so that you're now flying inverted, but it doesn't affect the ship's gravity, but it gives the rest of you a look on the other viewport, seeing the Harbinger. And he does this about every few minutes. He just kind of rolls it back and forth, changing the view. And this whole time, for about 20 minutes, that's all that's visible outside this viewport. As you are, for about 20 minutes, you're flying alongside Harbinger. What are you thinking about, Quinn?
Ever since the guards first mentioned this flyby close to Harbinger, Quinn has kind of grabbed onto the harness and just closed her eyes, and she kind of sunk in within herself because she doesn't want to see. She's not craning her neck to see outside. She's not looking at Harbinger at all. She almost like a physical reaction and just rejection of any sort of contact with Harbinger itself. And it's because she has seen what the spawn of Harbinger can do, and she is afraid. She doesn't want to go there. She's still processing that.
What about Fenris?
That is a big ship. That is all. That's
Kirst?
about the extent of his thought process.
All right, Kirst?
Well, Quinn is trying to look away from the Harbinger and what it is. Cursed can't keep her eyes off of it, and her mouth even goes a little bit slackjaw with just the size and the just how it looks. And she would just mutter to herself, "Can you imagine all the treasure in there?" As she's just gawking at this thing.
And what about Isaiah?
He would be perspiring and kind of tense and walking back and forth and probably trying not to make contact with it too much. But he almost seems in distress as they approach it, and even more so after seeing it.
And you would notice as the guards themselves are each time the ship rolls, they seem to kind of move to the opposite side, and the guards are almost like children looking at Harbinger. It's been a year since this ship, this massive ship, if it could be called that, this entity appeared out of nowhere. Nobody knows where it came from, but the day that it appeared, it shattered the moon of Verloren, and it changed forever the known orbits. It changed everything that everyone ever knew. And as you kind of roll back over so that you're flying right to it, so it's actually on the Harbinger is now on the starboard, the port side, sorry, the left side of the ship. So I believe that's Kirst and Isaiah that are currently looking at it. As you start to hear an alarm sound, and Sing Sing calls over the intercom, "Bearing 186 Mark 2.5. We got 3 bogeys." And the guards immediately shift over to the other side of the ship. So now Quinn and Fenris, you actually can see out. He says, 3 bogeys, about 5 clicks out. They appear to be fighting each other. And you can see the flashes of light and these ships just kind of moving in and around one another. And the guards are kind of excitedly looking up against the window, and Sing Sing comes over the intercom and he goes, reading their signatures now, and you're not going to believe this. It looks like 3 Skrug tugs. 3 Skrug warboats are fighting with each other. The guards are looking at, what? This is nuts. Hey, at least they ain't raiding us. What are you guys thinking as you're watching this? You say anything, or?
I think that oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Queen is probably thinking to herself that this is exactly why she doesn't want to have anything to do with Harbinger, because clearly it's affecting their minds. It's scrambling their perceptions, and they're fighting each other. And if we were ever to get close, we would also lose control of ourselves, or something unimaginably bad would happen. And that this is just further confirmation.
I think Kirst would be just kind of like hollering and whooping and like laughter and as excitement as every time they shift spots so that different people can see. She's kind of craning her neck to be able to constantly be seeing what is going on.
Fenris kind of, well, as much as he can, you can just see he kind of presses against his harness and seems to be trying to pay close attention to what's going on. You can see his eyes darting back and forth, following the action outside. Still looks expressionless on his face, but definitely is intrigued by what's going on outside.
Orion is rocking back and forth in his harness, as far as it'll let him. No, 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 no.
The guards, this time it's Leavenworth, kind of leans in on the cage and he says, "Hey, get a hold of yourself. You scared of some Skrugs out? Jeez, they're 5 kilometers away. Settle down, Orion, or I'm going to trank you again."
No, no, not today, no, no.
"Look, I'm not going to tell you again. You need to settle." And as he's saying this, you can hear Sing Sing is saying, the alarm is kind of vying for Sing Sing's voice in the alarm, and Leavenworth talking, and Orion kind of rocking, saying, "No, no, no," all seem to be happening at once. As Sing Sing goes, "Brace for impact!" As the ship kind of had pivoted, and it's actually a couple of the others that as it's rotating, you all kind of get a glimpse of this as you see the three Skrug ships that were fighting with one another. One of them bursts, just explodes apart. There's barely an explosion, just the flash of light reflected off of the pieces. And from the wreckage, one of the tugs comes flying straight toward your transport vessel. The other tug comes in behind it, arcs around, slams into the first tug. And I would like all of you to give me, and I'm going to say everybody except for Orion, since you're kind of rocking back and forth and caught up. I'd like the rest of you to give me perception checks.
Nine.
And you can go ahead and just say those. Is that 5 years, Megan?
Yep. Yep.
18.
So, Quinn, you're the only one that seems to really see what's happening. This, in a bizarre move, this second Skrug vessel that comes in from behind, it kind of does this motion where it, if you picture like as it's moving forward, like the inside of a bowl, so it kind of dips in an arc this way and fires some aft jets to kind of pivot it, and it slams into the first tug in a maneuver that its trajectory indicates it seems to be trying to almost like hockey check the first ship away from your vessel. Like it's a defensive maneuver trying to push it away. But it's not quite quick enough. It hits the first vessel, pops it into a tailspin, and as it completes a revolution, it slams into your ship. Your vessel is immediately sent rolling. You hear the cries of the 4 guards as none of them were strapped in, as they begin bouncing around the inside of the ship. The ship is moving so quickly in this rotation that the gravitational and acceleration compensators are struggling to keep up. And I need everybody to make a Constitution saving throw.
The 16 for me.
15.
14.
10.
Was that 14, Isaiah? Orion?
Yes, sir.
Was it Giuliani?
Yeah.
Quinn, I don't know why I'm suddenly calling you
Yeah,
by
yeah.
last name.
Yeah. It's good.
Quinn, and surprisingly crazy, the three of you, it's not the spinning motion, it's rather the fact that the compensators are trying to counteract that your stomach just starts churning and all of you vomit. Whatever rations you had eaten on your shift go out into the cabin and are now adding to the spinning. So it's unfortunately, I think everybody is probably going to get a little bit of spew on them as the ship is just spinning sickeningly around. Anybody looking out the window can see that the collision course that you've been set on is pushing you closer to the Harbinger. I would like to take just a quick moment and see what each of you are thinking and feeling in the instant of this impact. And we're going to go to Orion first.
He'd be spinning on, still stuck in one of his nose. And then he would puke out whatever he had eaten. And as he's spinning and stuff, it would get all over the people next to him. And he's assuming this is how it ends. His greatest fear to die in space. Not even on land, not with his feet on the ground. And he's not really terrified. He's just he's afraid that his fear is coming true.
Cursed.
I think that the smell of bile and vomit would just suddenly fill the room or fill the space, and so Cursed would just squint and kind of crinkle her nose at the absolute horrible smell. And as they kind of go careening towards, she is immediately looking for a way out. I think at this point, her survival instincts are just kicking in, and she is just looking for a way to escape. To her, this is maybe the promise of some sort of escape.
Fenris.
So Fenris kind of like struggles to reach up and just wipe a big wad of sick off of his eyes and kind of clears his eyes and looks up. As he realizes what's going on, he kind of just gets this look of oh boy, here we go again. And just as best as he can, he just kind of gets himself in a crash position, readying himself for what appears to not be the first time he's been through something like this.
And Quinn.
Once the heaving is done, Quinn would probably, similarly to Kirst, she would probably look around because she would try to get to the pilot's, that is her thought, to reach the pilot's cabin and kind of take control of the ship and turn it around. Anything but Harbinger, anything but crash land into anything but Harbinger.
And as these thoughts are going through your heads, I would like everyone to make another Constitution saving throw.
I got a 7.
8.
6.
17.
The next sound that you hear, you all have the feeling that this is probably the last sound you're ever going to hear, as your ears are filled with the sound of the explosive sound of rending metal on metal, the jolt, the sudden You feel every bone in your body as if it momentarily separates a few centimeters and slams back together. Quinn, Fenris, and Kerst, you all lose consciousness. Isaiah, you're the only one that remains conscious throughout this as the ship crashes into Harbinger. You hear explosions around the outside of the ship. You hear the sound of breaking glass and shattering steel coming from the front. And you can actually see as the bulkhead that was separating where the guards were from the front of the ship, as it bows outward, it splits the door. The door actually comes partially ajar, and you see the top half of Sing Sing flung through that door. Blood beginning to spill across the deck of the transport vessel. You see two of the guards, Riker and Leavenworth, knocked around like rag dolls. You can hear the shattering of their bones. And you even see Riker, the one who was doing your narration as you did the flyby. You see his eyes remain open as he crumples to the deck. And you see no movement from Leavenworth. All around you, you can hear the sounds of... you can hear the sounds of a couple of the other prisoners. Actually, only one other prisoner. Trinity, the White Rabbit, appears to have also maintained consciousness as the ship suddenly comes to a lurching halt. Fortunately for all of you, your 5-point harnesses were enough to keep you secured from bouncing around, and the transport section of this vessel remains mostly intact. As the ship, the last sounds you kind of hear, Isaiah, is you hear that kind of the aftermath of this crash. Is you can hear that hissing, you can hear that kind of as heavy metals are kind of settling, things that have been torn kind of settling in, and you can just hear that of instantly cooling metal as everything suddenly goes quiet. And then you just hear a and all 8 of your harnesses emergency releases go off. And that's when you realize, Isaiah, as one of the only ones conscious, that you have come to in a position where gravity is, the ship is upside down essentially, and you all drop about 6 feet. And actually, that is enough to jostle the rest of you awake. The ship has stopped moving. There's just those sounds of cooling metal, occasional creaks, hissing. The 4 of you and your 4 other prisoners are now free from your harnesses. What would you like to do?
I'd like to push off one of the other prisoners that fell on top of me and get up, and he's like looking around his body and touching and assessing to see if all his parts are actually there. And then he begins to laugh. And he just keeps laughing for quite a while, which is probably what the others would awake to.
And that's what you hear, Quinn. As you regain consciousness, dropping to the floor, you hear Isaiah laughing, and you realize you're loose.
Queen's thinking, oh, great, he's gone too. And then she would kind of frantically look about to see. I don't suppose there are any visible exits outside, right? Towards the outside of the ship, right? Because she would be looking, first of all, to see if maybe some creatures are invading or anything, because that's what she would be expecting from Harbinger. And if nothing like that would be happening, she would be trying to reach the pilot's cabin to get into contact with anyone via communications.
Looking around the backside of the ship, where you guys are kind of brought in, usually through like a loading door, everything is secured. All of the plasteel viewports, a couple of them are cracked, but they're all together. You can actually see this. You can actually see, surprisingly, these it almost looks like black and white, as if all color has been leached, but you see the lines of some sort of ship that are perpendicular to yours, as if your ship has been embedded in. You can actually see about halfway up the viewports is dark. You can only see out the back half, so it appears as though your ship is embedded more than halfway into this ship, as it appears, or at least what appears to be part of the Harbinger. There's no obvious and other entry points. But if you're going to start looking around towards the front, go ahead and give me an investigation while we go to Fenris.
So, did you say we're in a cage in the back of this?
Yeah, it's kind of like the back part of a paddy wagon, if you will, and then there's a cage that separates you from where the guards were.
Is there any kind of door on the cage, or was it just a solid wall cage?
There is. The cage kind of has in the center, in case the guards need to come in, there's a door that's kept secured.
So I as I kind of come to and realize what's going on, I see the bodies of the guards laying in the front half of the ship, and I just kind of I walk over to that cage door and just start looking at it to see if I can figure out any way that any kind of weak points or any kind of way that might be able to access that door.
All right, and you go ahead and give me investigation while we pop over to Kirst.
As soon as Kirst wakes up and she sees that she is out of her harness, she's going to just get right into just getting out mode as she just looks around, and I think she's going to assist Fenris in trying to find a way to open up this door.
All right. Okay. 1 second. I just lost one of my files. Instead of showing me the file, it decided to close. Here we go. Okay. So, Quinn, as you kind of are moving in along the side and looking towards the front of the pilot's section, you see immediately the guards all slumped. 2 of them are obviously dead. And you can, I should say, technically you see 4.5 guards, because the upper torso of Sing Sing has been tossed about. It's kind of a gory scene that you can't tell if the blood is all coming from Sing Sing or if any of the other guards, but there's a mass of broken bones and blood everywhere on the other side of this cage. But you do see, kind of as Fenris, as you kind of get up and are looking at that door, you see that the door itself appears to, the way that the cage crumpled when the ship collided, it's almost fused in a way that won't allow it to open. But at the same time, Quinn, you see that some of the cage welding has broken apart along the edges between the side of the bulkhead and the what's now the floor, but would be the ceiling bulkhead of this cage.
I just say, you guys can help me here, and I just start pounding on the edges of the walls of the cage so that I can break it apart. Kind of loosen up the already broken parts.
And I'll head over there and just start kicking at the welds.
It's a small enough space that you're pretty much already right there.
Okay.
So I would like, I don't care which one of you rolls it, but I need one of you to roll a strength check at advantage because you're helping each other.
I will. Well, 15.
It's a struggle as you're kind of kicking and pulling and grabbing at this cage, and you kind of kick it where the welds are, but it only takes you about a minute to break enough of it free that you can kind of and rip a corner of it aside, big enough for one at a time for people to move through into the guard area.
I think as soon as it's open, Kirst is just going to charge in, and she's going to begin patting down the guards that are obviously dead to see what she can find. She has this kind of like ferocity about her, as if like time is of the essence here.
Give me a investigation check at disadvantage because of all the blood. And you kind of hear...
It's a 13.
You kind of hear, I don't know what y'all doing, but you need to make it fast. As Crazy is looking at you from the back. She goes, we need to get out of here. And Dorian and the Smiler just kind of are... well, the Smiler actually is just sitting there with a smile on his face. Kind of sitting against the bulkhead. And after a few moments, you would realize that there's blood pooling around him. And you can actually make out the jagged piece of metal that's sticking out of his gut. When he fell onto a piece of torn fuselage. So Ronaldo Bax, the Smiler, did not survive the crash. But Dorian, Trinity the White Rabbit, and Florence Disco, known as Crazy, are all kind of standing there. They're like, y'all need to hurry up. Whatever you're doing. Girl, find them keys. And you're struggling, Kirst. And as you kind of are patting around, there's just... Your hands are covered in blood now. And you reach over to one of the other guards, and a bloody hand grabs at your wrist. It's Joliet. And he just grips your wrist, and he just looks at you. And he tries to talk, and and with every cough, thick black blood is coming out.
Kirst, I think immediately as soon as he would grab her arm, she'd take the heel of her palm and just jam it against his nose.
Give me, I'm not going to make you, technically, I guess it's technically an attack, but I want you to roll a strength check.
Okay.
And I'm going to say at advantage because you're close range and he's lying prone.
Okay. It's a 15.
There's a sickening crack as he's and you break that nose bone, driving the splinters into his head, and his eyes just glass over.
And she doesn't even look up or look around. She just has this look and she just kind of mutters to herself, "This is my chance. This is my chance." And she's just kind of frantically searching these guards.
Have Fenris or Quinn, have you gone in to the guard area yet?
Yeah, I held the tried to hold the gate area open as best I could until everybody had gone through, and then I follow through last.
Would you have gone through, Isaiah?
He would finally compose himself and brush himself off and walk over to the Smiler. I told you one day I'd wipe that smile off your face. And he'll place his palm on his hand, an astral bolt in the center of his face.
You still have your inhibitor collar on. So you can only imagine the Astra Bolt. You feel that internal, the ability you have for the Astra, but you feel it hit that buffer as it has so many times from the Astra inhibitor that's in your collar. So all you can do is imagine what his head would have done if you bolted him.
He'd get very upset and punch him in the face instead to try to wipe the smile off his.
Quinn, would you have gone through right away when, because you were the first one there when Fenris opened up the cage?
Yeah, that's number one priority. We have to get out of here. We have to get out of here. She would just rush to the console and just try and find. I mean, she's seen ships before, maybe not like this, but she was on one when they crashed. So she would look for the communications console to try and radio the closest thing to home, to safety, to not Harbinger.
So as I kind of imagine, you're the first one to scramble through, and you kind of head for that door separating the cockpit from this area, and Kirst kind of came in right behind you, and then the others would start kind of funneling in. So Quinn, you would find that the door that was separating the pilot section, the cockpit, from the guard section is about halfway open. And it's enough for you to see through into the cockpit. And the first thing you see is the cockpit is actually big enough to hold both a pilot and a co-pilot, though these transport vessels can be flown with just a single pilot. The pilot half of the cockpit has cleaved in through that side, and it's a piece of sheer metal, and you can see the lower half of Sing Sing still in the chair, and you can see the smear of blood where he was cut in half when that came in, and he was kind of pushed through the open door. But whatever else ripped apart, the right half of the cockpit has been ripped completely open. And you can see that though there's a tangle of wires and a little bit of metal and stuff, you can actually see through into a corridor.
I think she would just glance at the corridor just to make sure that there's nothing or no one coming, but then she would still beeline it for the command console. And that would be her first stop, to just, even if it looks broken, even if there's wires coming out, she would still try to operate the communications console.
All right. So while you're doing that, I want a tech check from you as you go to the console to see if anything you can make anything work. Kirst, as you continue, kind of after you've taken care of this one guard who was kind of coming to, the guard Folsom, he's kind of tucked in the corner, and he has He's almost, you almost didn't notice him because that's kind of where that upper torso of Sing Sing rested. And you hear a voice, a weak voice, go, "You're never gonna make it." But I know this is this is what you all dream of, huh?
I think Curse just kind of looks at him, and she just kind of tilts her head and just kind of smiles. I hope it'll give you peace to know that you are my favorite.
Yeah. I guess I didn't hate you either. For all the good it's gonna do. Here. And he reaches up with a bloody hand that you can see that 2 of his fingers are broken. And he hands you what looks like a small remote control that has a small LCD readout on it and a couple dozen buttons on it. You're gonna have to figure it out, but that goes to all your restraint collars. Good luck, Soriano. You're gonna need it.
And with that, she just kind of like nods. And she's just gonna do like a swift, as painlessly as she can, just like a swift knee, like grab his head and just like a swift knee down. But she has this control. Do you want me to do a strength?
No, he's completely restrained. He's not going anywhere. And he almost welcomes it as you put him out of his misery. And you now have a prison restraint collar control device. What did you get for your tech check there, Quinn?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you asking
Oh,
for one.
sorry. Yeah,
I
when
apologize.
you were heading for the console, I just need a tech check to see if you're able to get any luck
That's
with the
a natural
communications.
one.
So you kind of squeeze through that door, and you get up to where the one half of the cockpit is, and you're kind of messing around with the controls, and you are turning dials. You know what you're doing. You know what to press and what to do, but nothing's responding the way you want it to. And one of the controls just bursts in your face. You take 1 point of electrical damage as you kind of get zapped by this, as you have a hold of the console and it just kind of through you. And you see, when this happens, all the lights on the control center go dead.
I think she would just panic at this point. Just no, come on! I was so close. And I try the good old punch to see if it fixes it.
You get some bruised knuckles for your efforts, and behind you, you kind of hear, "Honey, you gotta let the experts handle this," as Trinity, the white rabbit, is standing there, kind of squeezing past. "I probably could have gotten it working. Don't know if I can do much now, but, well." And she kind of looks past you. She looks back, and she just suddenly kind of climbs up over the broken console, slips through some of the cables and ducts and broken stuff, and disappears into the shadows of whatever corridor was beyond. Fenris, what are you doing as Quinn has slipped past you? Kirst seems to be systematically killing the guards.
I am looking around, trying to find any kind of weaponry. I assume there's some sort of weapon stash that the guards would have had access to. So I'm looking around in any kind of closet or hatch or anything like that I can.
I'm not going to make you give investigation because it's clearly visible that on either side of this guard area are the weapons lockers. And I will require a tech check, though, if you're going to try to determine how to open it.
7.
So from a technology point of view, you have no idea if it's a key, a handprint, a code sequence, or what it is that requires this to open. Short of that, you could attempt brute force, as they are a little bit wrinkled.
So I walk over to what's left of Sing Sing, and I just kind of reach down and I pick him up and I grab his hand, and I just start touching his hand to various spots that look like they might work on the door.
You leave several bloody Sing Sing handprints all across the console for your efforts.
I just toss half carcass into the back corner of the area we're in and keep looking around for anything else I can spot.
Give me a perception check.
18.
You can see that the panel that you were pushing Sing Sing's hand on, as you look, you kind of see that one of the handprints didn't quite make a full handprint, and you realize that his hand was over the edge. The lower corner of it is kind of bent away and pulled up. And it's enough that you could get your hands under it and attempt to rip it off.
I rip it off.
Give me a strength check.
Nat 20.
You just peel it back like a sardine can, and you can see inside one of the weapons locker. And I would like you to roll me a d6 twice and tell me each time what you get.
6 and 1.
So you find in here, you find a carbine, and a scattergun, and you find a total of 25 rounds of ammunition. You find also 2 short-bladed swords.
Okay. I just start pulling them out and setting them on the deck next to me.
And what are you doing, Isaiah?
He's probably kicking Smiler's corpse, and he finally kind of gets the gravity of the situation, trying to realize we stopped, we hit something. He's not the smartest guy, but there's a burning sensation in his pores, throughout his skin, permeating through him, and a new dread, the dread that he feared as soon as he saw the Harbinger. He's worried about where he might be, so he's going to start looking around and hoping that that's not where he is, but he has a bad feeling about it.
You would have to move back toward the back of the ship, where you can see light coming in through the last little section of viewports. And you can see that you are perpendicular to... You can see where the torn metal is that your ship is embedded in. What, as you're looking at it, it appears to be this black and white, almost like really old and dirty, but some kind of a larger starship. Probably compared to your transport vessel, it's definitely quite a bit larger. You would estimate that based on where you are and as you're looking across it, it appears that you're looking, if this is an individual small ship you've crashed into, that you crashed in near the front of it, and you are staring at the aft end, and you can just make out where the engines would be. But as you're catching sight of that, you notice the almost black void just beyond it, and you realize that whatever this starship looking thing is, it's either attached to or is a part of the Harbinger itself. Quinn, give me a perception check. And Kirst, give me a perception check.
Natural 20.
So after you punch this console in frustration, and then Trinity kind of just disappears into the ship, there's the ship just, I mean, it's just subtle. Everybody would feel this. There's a slight shifting of the transport vessel as it just kind of goes just a couple degrees. You hear something go sliding across the floor and hit your foot, Quinn. Looking down, you see a light repeater that was probably the pilot's weapon slide from under the console and slide against your foot.
I pick it up, and it is a source of great comfort. I just clutch it like it's able to protect me entirely from whatever is coming. So I'm very glad of this find.
And it's this light repeater is is basically like a almost like a small rifle, and it has a full load, a full 10 rounds in it. What'd you get, Kirst?
I got a 3.
Okay. Isaiah, are you moving up from the back of the ship at all now, or?
Yeah, as it moves, he would try to like balance himself, putting out his arms. No, and he would start looking for things that he could pick up to help use as a tool or a utensil to help try to get out.
So in the back of the ship, you don't really see much of anything. And then as you start moving towards the front again, and maybe give one more glance down at the dead and almost unrecognizable form of the Smiler, you see that what it was that had pierced him was actually one of the other corners of the cage had been kind of pushed in and bent aside. And the way the ship shifted, Kirst is not that far from this section, this side of the ship. And there's a couple of guard bodies leaned up against it, but you can see that there's another weapons locker on the other side of the cage by Kirst, and that it looks like the access panel is partially pulled aside, but she probably can't see it because from her angle, the bodies are blocking where the corner would pull up. So you see that you could easily move into that area and go over by her and probably try to get that locker open. And you'd already see as Fenris is pulling a couple of firearms and a couple of blades out of this other locker.
I would definitely try to get that in shot.
So Isaiah comes in kind of climbing over the bodies next to you, Kirst, and pushes them aside a little bit to get a hold. He just reaches down to grab a hold of this. Give me a strength check.
$17.
It's a little slippery, a little slick with blood, but you kind of get a hold of it, the metal suddenly digging into your hand a little bit, and you get a grip and you start to pull on it, and then it just snaps loose and kind of slides in part way how it's supposed to. And I'd like a D6 roll from you twice.
Five and 4.
You find two heavy pistols, 25 rounds of ammunition. You also find the next two things that you find are wrapped up, like they seem to be in some kind of packaging, like they've never been used, like somebody just shoved them in here. But there's a warhammer and a war axe. Like brand new, never been used, still in the original packaging. Curse, I'm going to say from your earlier investigation, as you were kind of patting all the guards, you actually find, though they seem to be of little use now, you actually find the keys to the weapons lockers on one of the guards. And you find on one of them, you eventually find another one of those collar controls, but this one appears to be broken. You also find roll a d4.
It's a 3.
You find 3 glow rods. Give me another d4.
That's a 4.
You find 4 menders. And one more d4.
That's a 1.
You find an arc tool. It looks actually like it may have belonged to one of the guards, and it's actually like a more compact arc tool than typical.
What is Cursed wearing? Just
yeah, I'm sorry. I actually meant to tell you guys this at the very beginning. Bastards, which is just the common colloquial for all prisoners, wear a form of scout suit. So that actually, all of you need to know that in terms of determining what your AC is. It's a basic scout suit, but it's almost like turquoise blue is what's used to identify prisoners. So pretty much the color of your name banners on the overlay here, that's the color of what your jumpsuits are. and they would have your last names stenciled across the back shoulder, along with probably a barcode.
And what are the guards wearing? What Curse can see.
The guards are all also wearing scout suits, but they're wearing them in the Consortium colors, which are red and black.
She would begin, as much as she could. She would kind of spy the guard that is maybe has the least amount of blood on it, and she would begin to try and undress him so that she can get into less conspicuously turquoise clothes.
Okay. So we'll say that all of that is kind of happening at the same time that Quinn is finding the gun, and while you guys are all kind of doing this, and Fenris, you're grabbing these weapons, and Isaiah, you're grabbing a couple weapons. The guards actually, in the presence of the prisoners, never actually carried weapons because they had those control units that they could use to subdue you guys pretty quickly. You're able to get a suit off of one of the guards. It does have some blood on it, but it's not too bad. And so you would change into that. Yeah, so that's not any problem. In the meantime, Florence Disco and Dorian kind of make their way through, and Dorian, I'm going to actually have her try something. Give me a perception check, Fenris.
15.
As Dorian is slipping past, you're kind of setting the weapons kind of off on the side. And just as you turn to kind of lay another weapon down, you see Dorian crouching and reaching to grab one of the swords.
I nod.
She stops for a second as she makes eyes with you. Dorian is not very big. She's probably about 5'6", very slight. And she stops for a second, still looking at you, then reaches, grabs the sword when you nod, takes it, kind of holds it towards her, and disappears to the front and kind of comes around past you, Quinn, just glancing at you, and she also climbs out of the ship. So mark off one of those swords, Dwight.
Yep.
And also during this time, kind of right behind her, Florence Disco Crazy would just kind of push past, kind of give you a weird look, Cursed, as you're half naked, changing out of the one uniform into the other, and she just pushes through. She doesn't make any play for any weapons or anything, and she pushes out and leaves the ship as well. So on the ship, it's now just the four of you. And we'll say at this point, maybe 10 minutes has gone by at most. What would you guys like to do?
Are there any kind of holsters associated with these weapons that I found?
Negative.
Okay. So I gather up the scattergun and the other short sword, and in one hand, and I hold out the carbine in my other hand, and I just kind of look. Anyone? Kind of offering it around.
I signal. I lift the light repeater, like signaling that I already have something, and Quinn just says, her voice kind of cracking a little bit. She's like, "Well, we're not signaling back to base any time soon, so I guess this is it. I guess it's fight or die. So she seems to be at a loss for words and kind of trying to process the moment, but she does seem to take some comfort in the fact that you guys are armed and seem to be, actually wielding those with some skill.
I think that Curse would be looking at the this little device that the guard gave her, and just maybe just taking a few moments to try and see if anything is intuitive to her about how they are positioned.
How what's positioned?
Like the buttons and how they might work, and
give me a tech check. And I'm going to say, give me this tech check with advantage, because you've been here for a year. You probably would have seen them. You've probably seen them, had them used on you a few times.
That is a 22.
So, you know that there are 10 buttons near the top. 10, and this is like a kind of like a similar to about this size. It's like a small television remote control. There's about 10 buttons near the top, numbered 1 through 0, and you know that those are used to select a prisoner. And then there's an array of buttons down near the bottom that you know are used to deliver either a minor jolt, a major jolt, paralysis, unconsciousness, or there's a code that can be used to release them.
So I think she's just going to start pressing buttons. Selecting, going through each of the top ones to select a prisoner, and trying to put in the a code that she is guessing.
Okay, I was hoping you were going to do this. All right. So I'm going to do a couple things here. First, tell me which prisoner number. Hold on. I'm gonna just to make this a little fair, I'm gonna randomly assign each of you what your number is, because I should have done this beforehand. But this is what happens when you make stuff up on the fly. And then so tell me what number prisoner 1 through 10 you are going to press.
She's going to press 4.
And then roll me a d6.
So 3.
As far as you can tell, nothing happens.
Okay.
So you can go ahead and try a couple more times.
All right. 6.
And roll a d6.
A 1.
Quinn, you feel a sharp pain in your neck as you are delivered a minor jolt, and you take a point of shock damage as your collar jolts, and you kind of involuntarily just and you would hear this cursed as you have appeared to have identified that prisoner number 6 is Quinn.
Okay. She kind of lets out this very small little like, oh, and just like this little like smile.
Son of a...
You also now know which button causes a minor shock.
Okay. Can she try more, or do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay. 2 and 3.
So, Quinn, you would kind of, as she's just not too long gone past you, you hear, "Ugh!" from out in the passageway, and you see just about 20 feet down this corridor as Disco, known as Crazy, suddenly goes, "Ugh!" and just stops moving and kind of topples over, unable to move.
I tell Kirst, yeah, that was crazy, but I don't know what you did to him. Maybe it wasn't the same as you did to me.
You now know which one does paralysis, and so I'm going to say that eventually as you start playing around with this, you get a couple hits and misses, but eventually you figure out which buttons control all of you, and you know how to deliver each of the basic things. And you know that there's and eventually it's enough just playing around with it that you figure out how to unlock these collars.
Do they all unlock at the same time, or
Negative.
after you press a person?
Negative. You identify a prisoner, and then you unlock.
So she's, after kind of fiddling and probably some people being shocked, she eventually figures out which one is hers and which one will release her collar. And she releases her collar.
Okay. I'm sorry, you released your collar and what else?
Yeah, no, that's it.
Oh, just your own collar.
Yep.
So those around you, and a couple of you have been probably shocked by this, and you even saw Smiler's body jolt a little bit. You see as Kirst releases her own collar.
And she just kind of like rubs the back of her neck where I'm sure that this collar has rubbed raw. And she just kind of like stretches it a bit. And she takes her hand and she just kind of holds it up. And this little yellow spark just kind of plays around in her hand, and she smiles.
Care to do that for the rest of us? Quinn says.
Kirst turns to you and smiles. Yeah, absolutely. One thing. And she looks at Quinn and she looks at your light repeater. I would like that gun.
You any good with it?
Maybe, maybe not. But I like the looks of that gun. And she kind of holds up her hand with the remote.
I mean, can I tell how stable or unstable this conversation is gonna be? I look around the assortment of weaponry on the floor.
I'll hold the carbine up and just.
Yeah, I first pick up the carbine. I just nod to Fenris, and then I pass the light repeater to Kirst.
Ah, excellent. Thank you. And she would just take it, and then she would release the rest of everyone's collars. Not everyone's, just the people in... Just
the four of you?
Yeah, just the... Yeah.
Okay. So, after a moment, Kirst has released your collars. Isaiah, what's your reaction as soon as your collar comes off? It just kind of goes, and the two halves of it just kind of drop.
He was previously distraught and then worried, but now he's a little bit more excited. And he smirks because it's been months since he's had this damn thing off of him, that he's been able to really tap into what's inside of him. So he smiles, he kind of nods, and things are just a little bit better. Just a little bit.
How's Fenris feeling when your collar comes off?
So it comes off, it falls to the ground. He leans down and picks it up and then just throws it as hard as he can into the ground and stomps on it. And then kicks it off into the corner and then heads to the heads towards the exit in the front cabin. Everybody else walked out.
All right, so the only exit seems to be out that cockpit where Fenris is now climbing into the corridor. Are you all going to head out of the ship now?
I just motioned to Kirst, like, after you.
Oh no, ladies first. And she would just kind of do this kind of mock bow.
Anyone need this crap? And I would throw out the warhammer and the war axe as they would just weigh him down.
So if anybody has an interest in those weapons, a warhammer and a war axe are up for grabs.
Fenris comes scrambling back in at the sound of the axe dropping to the floor. Drops one of the swords and picks up the axe.
So now there's a sword, a short sword available.
Very good.
So you're going to take the short sword, Isaiah?
Yes, please.
All right.
And, if everyone's leaving, before they go to leave, I would take the collar from the ground and slide it into my scout suit.
Okay. So you can add a, we'll call it an inhibitor collar. So you guys now have a corridor that extends probably about 30 feet before you see a T intersection. About 20 feet down the corridor is the form of Florence Disco Crazy, who was paralyzed by Kirst's playing around. And she's just now kind of coming back to, and she's just kind of like, and she kind of looks back and sees the lot of you, and she, before she's even fully standing up, she starts to scramble forward, taking off, and she runs to that T intersection, and she turns to the right and disappears out of sight. The only way forward appears to be this. You can see, looking back now, that where your transport vessel has embedded itself in whatever this ship is, even though you've come out of it, you knew you were kind of perpendicular to it. As you move out of the transport vessel, you seem to be in line with the same plane that you were in the transport vessel. Though, Isaiah, I think you're the only one that really got a good look at this, looking, because you took the time to look outside. So we'll say if this is the Harbinger, or the ship that you were embedded into, that you came in like this on the side of Harbinger. So for all intents and purposes, this may or may not be the right, because this, you viewed this almost as an independent ship that was on the side of Harbinger. So you almost feel like you should not be going in this direction. You're the only one that really senses that. So it's maybe just throws off your perception for a moment. But gravity seems normal. Everything else seems to be moving the way it should.
We were trying to head out through the back.
No, you were coming out the hole of the cockpit. Out the back is space. And it also appears gravity seems to be at normal levels, and oxygen levels, the atmosphere is perfectly breathable. You do notice that there are some small electrical bursts and occasional, you can hear kind of in the distance, just little muffled explosions. Who's taking point? What's your marching order going to be?
I'll head up front.
All right.
I'll take second spot.
First is last.
Good.
All right. So you begin moving forward towards the intersection. As you're moving along, are you guys kind of moving cautiously? Are you just kind of moving at a normal pace? Weapons drawn? What are you doing?
Yeah, I will have the scatter gun out and drawn, and I'm just kind of almost, definitely have gun at the ready and taking a cautious approach. I've ripped a piece of my shirt and used it to make a makeshift sling for the axe that I've got slung on my back at this point. So
My scout's training is starting to kick in, and Quinn is kind of falling back on whatever is familiar, like the military routine to handle this place, but she's very cautious and her hands are a little trembly. The carbine's a little unstable.
Go ahead.
As they would be looking around, you said that there was like sparks.
Yeah, some of this corridor that you're in is about probably about 10 feet wide and about 10 feet high. It's got this kind of grungy look to it. It seems to be mostly bare metal, like steel, without any kind of real decoration. Mostly smooth panels with maybe a little bit of like a crisscross pattern on each, like say like a 10-foot by 10-foot section. There's like a big crisscross pattern, but there's smaller panels throughout these, and there's places where panels have broken loose and there's electrical sparks happening. Occasionally you see a loose wire just kind of.
That's the only light?
There are lights that kind of run along the floor that are relatively dim, almost like emergency lighting. So we'll say you guys are in dim lighting that has a slight yellow tint to it. So as you're moving down this hallway, I would like everyone to roll. Actually, first, I'm going to roll that. Okay. You get about halfway down the corridor. And I'm going to say, Isaiah, roll me a D20.
14.
From the side, as you're walking along one of the side areas where you see a few loose panels, there's some sparks, just kind of. And just as you kind of look, Quinn, you're starting to get your bearings. You look off to the side and you see these sparking wires, and then you see a broken pipe, and you hear the just as a wire sparks, and there's a flash as there's a small explosion, and I need a dexterity saving throw from everyone.
4.
16.
19.
7.
Kirst and Isaiah, you just kind of instinctively move almost against the same wall where the explosion comes from, and it kind of, the blast misses you for the most part. So you only take 3 points of fire damage as this thing explodes. But Fenris and Quinn, you take 6 points of fire damage as this blast slams you up against the opposite wall. And you get the sense that whether this is normal for Harbinger or because your ship crashed into it, that you must tread carefully because this is a very unstable environment. How's everybody faring from those injuries? Quinn, how are you doing?
At this point, Quinn's looking pretty bruised and battered. Smoke coming off her scout suit. Pretty like dark smudges on her face. Pretty ragged. She's looking pretty ragged.
Yeah, you've got a big bruise on the side of your head, and like along your brow and down the side where you smashed your head up against the side, and there's maybe some blood trickling down. What about Fenris?
Fenris is a little bit beat up. He's got a bloody nose. He's got some cuts on his forehead, some cuts on his arms, but is able to shake it off relatively quickly. Again, not something that he's unused to.
Are you all going to continue then the rest of the way down this hall? Everybody's still on their feet and able to keep moving. Okay, so kind of perhaps a little bit more cautiously, you begin moving forward, and you get to this T intersection. And just as you, Fenris, in the lead, as you get to this T, you're coming up to this T intersection. You had seen Crazy. She took off and went around to the right and disappeared from sight. And just as you're coming up to this intersection, you see Crazy. You hear her, and you see her suddenly running past you, moving to the other direction. And just as she gets in front of you and she kind of turns and sees you all, her head explodes in a fine red mist as a pulsar blast hits her in the back of the head. And her body hits the deck and goes skidding.
Is there anything that Fenris could use to take cover behind, or
other than the other people in the hallway? No.
Okay. So he brings the scatter gun up to full ready at this point, pointed in the direction that the shot came from.
Do you look around or step out into the intersection, or what do you do?
Yeah, I'll cautiously peek around to see if we see anything.
So you peek around the corner, and you see, as you look around the corner, you see 3 creatures that they are 3-eyed creatures that a couple of them are down on all fours, and they're kind of skittering towards this intersection. One of them just skitters across on all four on its hands and feet, and as it kind of comes up, it momentarily moves up onto the side wall. transitioning up and just skittering along the wall. They're roughly the size of small humanoids. And I think all of you have been in the system long enough to recognize Skrugs when you see them. And you know these to be Skrug crawlers. Standing behind these Skrug crawlers, these 3 Skrug crawlers, one of which is raised up on 2 feet and holding a smoking pistol, having just fired a shot that killed Crazy. Standing behind them, kind of slouching, much bigger than them, almost with an ape-like posture. 4 massive arms, one wielding a scattergun, one wielding a war axe. You see this Skrug brute standing in the hallway. And that's where we're going to end for tonight. Next session, next week, is going to begin with you all rolling for initiative for your first combat. As you are now officially released from your prison sentence, but perhaps in a little bit of a new prison term. So real quick, I'm going to pop around to each of you and just see what do you think about this first session and how are you feeling both as a player and a character. Alexa, how about you?
So as a player, I still have some Harbinger related, things to clear out in terms of, stats and items and things like that. But we'll iron those out fairly quickly. But this is definitely what I was hoping for. Explosions in space and people dying in sprays of blood in front of me. And as a character, this is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. It's kind of facing fears and not being proven otherwise. So we'll see if Quinn survives the next encounter.
Dwight.
So yeah, this has been a pretty cool start, I guess. It's like I said, my first time really being exposed to Harbinger. Even I haven't really seen any games played or had a chance to play any yet, so I definitely like what I've seen so far. It's as far as the character goes, it's definitely Fenris doesn't really think a whole lot about what's going on. He just sees what's happening and acts on it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in this next round. But I definitely I enjoyed the amount of RP we got to do tonight. Our group, we tend to murder hobo everything. So it was nice to get a chance to just to play and get into the heads of these characters a little bit. So,
well, welcome to a MTD game. Megan.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. We have some different characters, which is always really, really cool to see all the different personalities and how they mesh or don't mesh together. That's always a lot of fun. I love Harbinger, so and yeah, this is classic Harbinger, which is awesome. So yeah.
And finally, Chad.
We're still alive, so that's a win so far. Maybe even just barely, but still there. Great introductory session, I think. Getting to start putting all that foundations in place that are going to be built off of. That's, I guess, as me as a player, as a character. I'm having fun exploring him. It'll be fun to see where his path ends up going. And thank you for the opportunity.
I really love just putting, it's the diversity of having 4 unique players that have created these characters and seeing how you're going to play off of each other. And even I'm surprised to see some of the actions. I've played with Megan so many times, and she constantly surprises me with characters. When you decided to just drive your fist into the guard's nose and then mercy kill the other guard, and Isaiah over here beating up on a dead nemesis, and Quinn just struggling to get out. No, I mean, at least two of you are like, no, I do not want to be on Harbinger. And I love that. And I deliberately decided to take our time with this one and let you kind of just experience the propelling incident that kind of forces you into the action without rushing you too much. And I debated going into the combat, but I know even small combats like this can draw out a little bit longer. And I said at the start, these are going to be 2 to 2.5 hour games. That would have probably pushed us longer. So we get to start the next session with rolling for initiative and a combat, and you guys are still at level 1 versus 4 Skrugs. So we're going to see what happens here. But you have also uncovered my... I developed this a long time ago for a Harbinger game that never happened, and it's a random hazard roll table. And fortunately, of 3 tries, of 3 times that I rolled on the table, only once did something happen, and that's where you guys got that explosion. So I'm having a lot of fun with this. I have a general idea for the first probably 3 sessions of where things are going to go. Beyond that, I think by the end of next session, I think we're going to get to a point where it's going to start to be really that you guys are in control of where you're going to a certain extent. But more so at the 3rd session, it's really going to open up where you're going to have a lot of choice, and you guys, the 4 of you, are going to really dictate the direction that the remainder of the campaign happens. Really, I kind of set up some general themes, and I want you guys to explore that. So even though it's a mini campaign, it's going to have some elements of this kind of open world feel, and we're just going to see what happens with it for the next couple months. A note for people that are watching, and my intention for you guys as well, is I'm going to try to same week, if not next day, get the VODs loaded onto YouTube. But they are available on Twitch for, I think I get 60 days for my VODs. I can't remember. Might be 30 days. But, so yeah, and I might even rerun these midweek or prior to the next session. So, we'll have a session next week, and then we are taking a break for the Memorial Day weekend. And then we'll be back on for a little while, and we might have some players taking some breaks here and there. So with that said, I want to say a huge thank you to Alexa, Dwight, Megan, and Chad for agreeing to take this little journey with me. I'm really excited to get to play with Chad again, get to play with Dwight online. Always a pleasure to play in or with Megan, and to welcome Alexa, who we met because of the interest post for this game on Twitter. So, and as those of you who watched last week, I ran a game of 5 players who I had never met before, putting an interest post on Twitter. So keep your eye out. You might get a chance to play in a mini terrain domain game if that is your desire. So thank you to everybody who has watched. Thank you to these players. Check them out on their respective channels and their handles on Twitter. Be sure to follow and possibly even subscribe. You get a free Twitch Prime subscription, or Amazon Prime gives you a free Twitch Prime subscription every month. That'll help us to make more great content like this. I'm Jake from Mini Terrain Domain, and as we always end MTD&D game, omitted and